Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying tuned for my Capstone presentation. My name is Temiloluwa Akinyemi. And I did my capstone here, understanding the interplay between aquaculture, fisheries, and trade, and to see how they impact food and nutritional security in Africa. But before I dive into this talk, I would like to share a brief about my background. Majority calls me Temi, but my full name is Temiloluwa, and it means God is mine. My interest in this capstone work started during my bachelor's degree in aquaculture and fisheries management in Nigeria. And Nigeria is known to be the second largest producer of aquaculture in Africa and the largest in the whole of West Africa. So I came from Nigeria. And from there, I moved to Ghana to study fishery science. And Ghana is known for their robust fisheries. There, I was able to work with different stakeholders in fisheries and aquaculture, and I was able to learn about the wicked problem in these industries. So because of that, I decided to come to UCSC to learn about how to bridge the gap between science and policy. And through this program, I've been able to do my capstone program with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And as we all know, Monterey Bay Aquarium helps fish lovers and even businesses to choose the right kind of fish for their health and even for their businesses. And so when you talk about fish lovers, I can say that Africa is one of the continents in the world that loves fish so much, in that fish serve as a key source of their income, their livelihood, and even their nutrients. An example you see in Nigeria, where fish provide 75% of their total animal protein, and also in Ghana, 60%. And when you look at the whole of Africa as a whole, you could see that more than 35 million people in Africa actually depend either wholly or partly on fishery sector for their livelihood, for their income, for their nutrient. But the problem, which is we all know, but it's still very sad, is the over exploitation of fisheries, which has resulted to a decline in fisheries. So to solve this problem, to have enough fish for people to eat, their stakeholders decide to depend on imported seafood. And this has led to over dependence on imported seafood. And because of the exporting countries' condition like price fluctuation, like when COVID-19 happened, that we could not import or export fisheries in and out of the country, stakeholders, policymakers are now thinking towards aquaculture to be the solution to all these problems. However, these shifts often neglect the critical need to preserve and sustain our wild capture fisheries. As you can see from the picture, there's still ongoing cycle fishing that we call transshipment in Ghana, and there's still level of overfishing still going on, even around the world. So with this in mind, my team, in person of Dr. Elena, who is my advisor, Dr. Andre Bustani, who is my practitioner partner, and Dr. Han, who is my co-advisor, we decided to look into, okay, so how much is aquaculture actually contributing to seafood production, to nutrients availability in Africa, and to also see how much is fisheries and trade contributing to seafood and nutrients availability in Africa, and also to see how well is Africa doing when it comes to meeting their nutrients requirements through blue foods. So to do this, I collected secondary aquaculture and fisheries data from FAO spanning from 1996 to 2020. And then I collected nutrient data on calcium, protein, zinc, iron, fatty acid, vitamin A, vitamin B12, and vitamin B12. And I collected this data from Aquatic Food Corporation database, but it was aligned with ARTIS data by Dr. Jessica Gifford. And ARTIS is the Aquatic Resource Trading Species. So and this is because I used the import and export data from ARTIS, which is the Aquatic Resource Trading Species, and all this span from 1996 to 2020. So to do the whole thing, so I did the whole thing per capita. So to do that, I had to use the population that I got from United Nations and World Bank website. So I started this work with Nigeria and Ghana, studying Nigeria and Ghana, aquaculture. But then because of data discrepancy and because of some nuances that that we thought would be too much for this project, we decided to look into 18 countries in Africa with some level of aquaculture. But then for now, I'm looking at all the coastal countries in Africa, including the ones surrounding Lake Victoria, just to see how much they are doing and contributing to food production and nutrient production in the country. And to do this, so to calculate the amount of nutrients imported, exported, and even produced through fisheries and aquaculture, this is the formula that I used. And also I used to calculate the total nutrients available for consumption. I used this formula, fisheries, aquaculture plus imports, and then minus exports. So what remains after export, that is what I use. And to calculate the per capita, of course, I divide by the population. So for this, to understand the trend from each sources, from aquaculture, from fisheries, from imports, and from exports, I decided to do this analysis relative to 1996, so as to see whether there is increase in aquaculture or there is reduction in aquaculture, just to see how the trend goes from 1996 to 2020. And that to calculate the recommended dietary intake, I use the recommended dietary intake provided by the Food and Drug Administration. And for protein, so for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be presenting the RDI for only protein. And what I used was 50 grams. And to calculate the percentage recommended dietary intake met with the available protein, this is the formula that I used. So from this data, we were able to categorize all these countries into 5 typologies, but for the purpose of this presentation, also I'll be talking about just 4 typologies based on their production of fish for food and nutrients. So the first typology we saw was countries that uses import and aquaculture to replace their declining fisheries. And the second typology was countries that uses import and aquaculture to supplement their fisheries. And the fourth, we saw countries that rely so much on imports for their food production and for their nutrient production. And the last typology we saw was country with declining fisheries, but with increasing exports. So for the first category, the first one we saw, it's mostly for Nigeria and Ghana. So Nigeria and Ghana, they use imports and aquaculture to replace their declining fisheries. And as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, it's relative to 1996 to see the trend. And green is telling us fisheries import is red, aquaculture in blue, and then exports in purple. And as you see here, relative to 1996, there has been decline in fisheries that produces both protein and calcium. And when you look at the blue line for protein, you could see that the blue line is coming up, which means that there's growing of species that produces protein for these countries. But when you look at the calcium, it's not as much as evident as it is for protein. And also when you look at the imports, you could see that there has been steady increase in the importation of seafood that provides protein and calcium for these countries. So for category 2, which is countries that uses import and aquaculture to supplement their fisheries, the example we saw was from Egypt, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Zambia, sorry. And this country, as you can see also, it's relative to 1996, there has been increase in aquaculture production that produces both protein and calcium. And there has been increase in importation also. So for the third category, countries that rely so much on import, as you see here, they have like little fisheries, but when it comes to where they get the fish that provides both protein and calcium and even other nutrients for them, it is mainly through importation. So relative to 1996, there has been increase in importation of fish. And when you look at it, for their exports on the positive line, telling us that there has been decrease in exportation. So they're not exporting as much, but they are importing a lot. So the last category that I'm going to be talking about is countries with declining fisheries, but increasing exports. And as you see, example in Mauritania. So these guys, Senegal down to Seychelles, they have robust fisheries per capita, and but they export almost everything out of the country. We leave them with nothing, almost nothing for their country to eat or for their nutrients. So for fisheries that produces both protein and calcium for this country, you could see that there has been steady decline in fisheries for this country, and there has been increase in exportation. And when you look at even 2020, it looks like for protein, they export almost all the fish that could give them protein in this country. So after looking at the relative contribution of these sources, then we decided that, okay, let's look at how much of these available nutrients actually meets the recommended dietary intake for protein. But we look at it in the context of planetary boundaries. And when you talk about planetary boundaries, it means that, so what human activity is safe for the planet? So a paper by Kaita that came out recently mentioned that fish have significantly lower environmental footprints than any terrestrial animal sources in terms of greenhouse gases, in terms of water use, in terms of land use. And so this means that fish is one of the few animal protein sources that can potentially help nations stay within the safe operating system while also improving their human nutrition. So with this in mind, so this means that if African nations could meet a larger share of their protein needs from aquatic sources, they could support food security while also taking care of the planet and not pushing its limits. So to see whether the available protein meets the recommended dietary intake for protein, this is how it looks like. The entire map of Africa, all the coastal countries, and even the ones surrounding Lake Victoria. This is how it looks like when you look at the whole of Africa together. But so I decided to put this into region so as to give a clearer view. So for North Africa, you could see Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, and Nigeria. And when you think about, okay, so how much are these guys meeting when it comes to their protein is, how much are they meeting through fish? Egypt meets 26% of their protein through fish, and it's coming mainly from aquaculture. And Morocco is missing 18%, and that is coming majorly from fisheries. And you look at Tunisia, Tunisia is missing 15%, and that is coming from both aquaculture, from fisheries and importation and growing aquaculture, we can say. And when you look at West Africa, so you can see that there are like two different typologies here. So we could see at the Atlantic section, we see that most of their fish is coming from fisheries. And when you look at maybe the Gulf of Guinea, we could say, you see that most of it is coming from importation. So this is, let's say, the Gulf of Guinea, most of it is coming from importation. And for the one to the Atlantic side, you can see that most of their fish is coming from fisheries. But the most interesting thing is that these guys that get most of their fish from importation, they are meeting almost 30% of their RDI through fish, which is very interesting. And Mauritania and Guinea-Bissau is in dashed line because it's in negative. So this is telling us that Mauritania export more than they produce out of the country. So this is either there is underreporting of production data that I collected from FAO, or there is overestimation of export data. But because I had a meeting with the FAO statistician during the process of analysis, and I was told that there is underreporting of production data from this country. So I could say, and because of my trust in the artist data that I use for import and export data, so I could say that it is due to underreporting. That is why it is on the negative side. But this is not still saying that this is not negating anything. It is just saying that if Mauritania is not exporting, so if they are not exporting anything, they are exporting more than 99% or 90% of their card out of the country still. But this tells us that they actually have a potential of meeting their recommended dietary protein if they can solve their export issue. And for East Africa, you see that these guys are not doing as much. And Eastern Africa and parts of Northern Africa, you could see that these guys are not doing really well when it comes to them meeting their protein needs through fish. But Uganda is coming up with 14% of their RDI protein, and they are doing that through fisheries also and growing aquaculture. And for Southern Africa, Southern and Central Africa, you see that they are doing good, but not as much as some countries in West Africa. But you could see that for Seychelles has the same thing with Mauritania, exporting almost everything out of the country. So they are negative because of what I mentioned earlier, underreporting of their production data. And so one country that is really doing well, meeting 84% of their RDI through fish, is Mauritius. But the interesting thing is that they are meeting it through imports. So to see how well these guys are doing relative to 1990, I decided to compare the graph. So the map I showed you earlier is for 2019. So I decided to see, okay, so how well are they doing? Let's do it relative to 1996. So 2019 minus 1996, the percentage they met in 2019 minus percentage they met in 1996. Are they doing well? Are they doing bad? And you could see that Mauritius, that I mentioned, the Mauritius, Cote d'Ivoire down to Zambia, they are increasing their RDI. And then when you come down to Seychelles, Namibia, Mauritania, Senegal, these guys, and even Cape Verde, these guys are not, they are reducing, they are decreasing their RDI, and this is mostly because of exploitation. So looking at all my findings, I can say that aquaculture alone will not suffice to fulfill the nutritional and food needs of these nations. So all African countries needs to come together and implement effective fisheries management while also exploring sustainable aquaculture options. So for countries like Ghana, Nigeria, that focus on tilapia and catfish mainly, and with what the graph I showed you earlier, that the aquaculture is giving them protein, but not much of calcium. And as you see, even in this graph here, for vitamin A, they are not getting much from their aquaculture. So there's need for them to explore other fish species so as to have a broader range of necessary nutrients while rebuilding their wild stock fish. And for countries that exhibit high level of export alongside significant reliance on fisheries, there's a need for them to balance their trade policy so as to have enough fish for their people to eat and to have nutrient. And also African government needs to invest in regional trade because there are some countries that are trying to do well, there are some countries that are not doing well at all, and there are some countries that have more than enough that could support other African countries. So if they can invest in regional trade, it will help countries that are not doing as much as they should. And they should run this. And there should be a parallel investment in aquaculture if they for the export. So after my findings, I was invited to Ghana because I went there to collect some data. So I was called to come and give a presentation of my findings to them. And because they were at the verge of renewing their aquaculture and fishery policy, I was called to present my findings to National Fisheries government in Ghana. And there I gave them my recommendation. I showed them my findings, and they received it well, and they asked for more. And yeah, I had the opportunity of presenting to the Montreal Bay Aquarium data team also, and I was also invited to the Black and Marine Science where I met some stakeholders in Nigeria, and I was able to present my work there also. And yeah, I have a drafted manuscript I'm working on with Dr. Jessica Geffert and Dr. Andre, Dr. Elena, myself, and Dr. Rachel, yes. So the next step for this project, I've been invited to the World Aquaculture Summit to have an oral presentation of these findings. So this summit allows all stakeholders, all African governments that are interested in fisheries and aquaculture, all policymakers, in fact, even the FAO, World Bank, all investors in aquaculture, this summit brings all of them together. So this will allow me to disseminate all my findings to them at once. And it will help me to also build connection. And then I will be collaborating with the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition. These guys, they help to develop and train Africans in fisheries and aquaculture development. So we'll see how we can use my findings to help African countries when it comes to maybe the kind of species that should be selected for aquaculture. So before questions, I would like to say a big thank you to my practitioner partner, Dr. Andre. He was and is a present partner. He really tried for me throughout the stage of this project from the beginning to the end. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Elena for mentoring me well, for allowing me to grow, for standing by me every time. And to Dr. Jessica Geffert, all the data I used, especially for nutrients and the trade data, she gave everything to me and she made my projects very, very easy. I want to say thank you to her for replying to my emails every time and not getting tired of me. Thank you so much. And to Dr. Han, thank you so much, my co-advisor, for your mentorship, for always being there to support, for your encouragement, and even for your connections. Thank you. Thank you so much. To Sarah, I say a big thank you to you. Thank you for taking us in as your children. Thank you for supporting us. And thank you for being ready to help us anytime, any day. Thank you. And to Haley, I say thank you to you. To Rachel, Rachel really helped me with my manuscript, with the project. I say thank you to you. Thank you for honoring me. Thank you for supporting me. And to Professor Larry Crowder, he took me in immediately I got to Monterey. So he helped me throughout from the beginning of my project, even to the end. He really did well for me. And to my colleagues, I will say that thank you for allowing me to be part of this journey with you. And to the entire CSP staff, I say thank you to you. Professor Pete, thank you. Thank you for all your recommendations. Thank you. And to Montreal Aquarium, who sponsored my project and even my schooling, I say thank you. And thank you everyone for your time and interest in sustainable food and nutrients for African countries. I will have your questions.